For those that don't know me, from Michael's quick introduction, before I was a cop, I spent 11 years in the Navy as well, with a trip up to the Persian Gulf and a bit of active service there. So I've sort of been on the other side of the fence, kicking indoors and pulling up crops, and after injuring my knee and getting off opiates, I now use cannabis on a daily basis instead of opiates. So that's how I got to this path in life. And what I'm going to do today is give you a quick presentation on the last year of advocacy in Australia and what's happened and what we've been able to do as advocates and people that are talking about it. Okay, so this time last year we had no federal legislation. We had 0 states with medicinal cannabis legislation and 0 states with recreational cannabis legislation. Don't mention recreational. Now we have it federally legalised to grow for medicinal and scientific purposes. And we have 1 state with medicinal cannabis legislation with a couple along the way, and still 0 states with recreational cannabis. My crystal ball says by the time we hit 2020, I think we'll see all states with medicinal cannabis, and I think we'll see our first state pop through with recreational. That's my goal. That's what I'm planning on aiming to with a realistic time frame, and I think it's pretty achievable. So what's happened since to cause all this? Okay, so July 2015, as you know, the New South Wales government committed $9 million to support medicinal cannabis trials, and that was after the Lambert Institute as well started up at the University of New South Wales with a $34 million donation from the Lambert family, which is fantastic. October 2015, the federal government announced it was going to legalise the growing of cannabis for medicinal or scientific purposes. And all the advocates got excited and thought finally there's going to be some cannabis getting into some patients' hands and they're going to be able to get some stuff, and we were happy for a while. February 2016, this was one of the bigger ones that came through when the Senate passed the amendment to the Narcotic Drugs Act. What this enabled to do was Australia to be able to supply its own cannabis instead of having to import it. So that crossed a lot of hurdles and is going to stop a lot of bureaucratic tape getting through. April this year, in 2016, the Victorian Parliament approved access to the medicinal cannabis bill. Dan Andrews was promising one of his election things and he put it through, so that was good to see. And also around the same time, Tasmanian Premier Will Hodgman announced that medicinal cannabis scheme would be available to patients in 2017, so still talking. So we know that politicians say one thing and then whether they act or not's a different thing, but that's what we're here for, and to keep them accountable to their word. And also you would have seen on the news, Dan Eden opened in Tamworth by Acting PM Barnaby Joyce at the time. So we're getting confusing messages as well. We're seeing politicians condoning places opening up that are going to be growing cannabis, and we've still got states that are going to be ramping up drug prohibition and putting harder, stricter ties on it. So there's still a lot of confusion out there. So what about the other states? WA, Premier Colin Barnett favours medicinal cannabis, in some cases cancer and pain, but continues to be an observer of the New South Wales trials. This is a fairly familiar theme among politicians. They just like to look and see what everybody else is doing. It's another way of saying, I'm a little bit too hesitant to do anything yet, and I'll see if someone does it first. And in Queensland, you would have seen Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk praises the Queensland Public Health Medicinal Cannabis Bill, which is going to be debated at the moment for public use. So I'm based in South Australia. That's where I live at the moment. I'm a uni student. I'm doing teaching, majoring in science and health, so I'm able to use that when I speak to politicians and that sort of stuff as well. So I don't come across as the Nimbin sort of hippie stereotype with a tie-dyed t-shirt and that sort of stuff. That's been tested and tried, and politicians, especially the conservative ones, just put up a wall and they won't speak to them. But if I rock up with my war medals and that sort of stuff and they know I used to be an ex-cop, then they're sort of forced to listen sometimes, which is good. So I got invited to the drug policy roundtable that the Greens were doing around the country. So I went to Parliament House and got to speak to Richard Di Natale and a few others, and especially all the big South Australian heads of all the drug and alcohol services, about their thoughts on medicinal cannabis, how we should do it, how it should be taken forward and progress and that sort of stuff. It was a lot of debate, a lot of good debate, and there was a lot of discussion about how it should be moved forward. From that, we found out that there's pretty strong bipartisan support in South Australia for medicinal cannabis. And like I said, you can't even mention recreational cannabis at the moment. No one wants to talk about it, and they'll just refer you to the South Australian Police if you mention it. One of the big things I've noticed when I've been speaking to politicians, last week I got to brief the Minister for Disability, Substance Abuse and Mental Health, Lisa Vlahos. She's a conservative right-wing, I guess you could say, and she's very hard on drugs. But I was managed to personalise the presentation for her so she could see that kids were benefiting from illegal cannabis use and that sort of stuff. I told her all about the cannabis use that I use, how I use it, how much I use, where I get it from, all that sort of thing. Told her that I grew my own plant this year because I can in South Australia, it's decriminalised. So we need to start talking to politicians, not as if they have authority or title, but just as a normal person that can benefit from cannabis. And if they can't benefit from cannabis, you can be pretty sure that someone in their family or one of their friends could probably benefit from cannabis. Because of this, because cannabis is still stigmatised and there's, it's getting better, but there's a lot of people out there that are still risking jobs and livelihoods and careers. I know a lot of ex-police friends, a few of them have children with epilepsy. They've aged 20 years in the last 5 years because they're forced to use legal debilitating anti-epileptic drugs where they know cannabis can stop the seizures and reduce the seizures massively. Harm reduction is a massive thing that we need to talk to politicians about. It's not just about legalising something or banning something. It's if we do this, what sort of harm will be being reduced? Is it going to be a detriment to someone? Is it going to benefit people? If it's just going to benefit people and not be a detriment, why the hell aren't we doing it? And like Michael was saying before, it all comes down to just cash and profit. That's the only excuse that this isn't happening faster. Speaking of cash and profit, which you'll hear later from Abe, that's starting to change that conversation. Okay, so the measure of success of our advocacy and legalisation and legislation that gets passed is how many patients now have cannabis and are able to use it legally. That answer is 0, that I know of. Lene Carter, who's been through over a year so far with the TGA process and the SAS to get the cannabis legally, is still being put through loops and stupid amounts of red tape and that sort of stuff. So it's still not happening. People are still using illegal cannabis because they can't wait for the legal versions to come through. Meanwhile, we're living healthy, illegal lives as criminals. There's no one that doesn't know me at schools and that sort of stuff. Every single person knows that I use cannabis instead of opiates, and I'm happy to explain to them why. I've got a healthy life and a functioning life. I'm doing fine academically. I'm an honest student, so all of the stigma that people have got about motivation and lazy stoners and that sort of stuff, then I'm happy to chat to them as well. So collaboration. This is a bit of a talking point that we'll probably have to get into further at another stage. It's the key to making positive change. I think we've started to become a little bit cliquey along the lines of advocacy now, where people are supporting their belief. We sort of need to come together again and get a little bit more collaborative. One of those things is working with medical professionals. It's fine to have clinical data, and politicians won't do anything without clinical data these days. But what some of them don't realise is while the clinical data is fine and being proven in a lab, people like myself and others in the crowd here are using cannabis every day without any clinical data, testing their dosages, testing their strains, testing all the different things you can do with cannabis to get their medicine fine, because there's no legal option that's going to give them a better choice. And sleeping with the enemy, Big Pharma. You would have heard Michael before talk about GW. We need to collaborate with the pharmaceutical company. It's going to happen. I think pharmaceuticals are going to have a pretty big field in palliative care, especially where nanas can just take their 1 pill of oil in the morning or 1 capsule of oil and they're fine. But if they want to, they can have a little bush out the back that they can grow for their own little special strain and that as well. So I've got grandparents in palliative care. I'd like them to be able to legal access or access legal medicines that pharma companies do produce. But I'd also like to be able to sit out the back with my nan and have a spliff with her as well and talk about the good old days. So we have to cover both bases, and we've got to be able to work with them, not try to work against them or demonise them a little bit more. I know that's a little bit hard for some people to hear, but if we want to see proper progress, then I think that's a way forward. So what happens now? Political pressure, lots of it. I annoy politicians all the time and I love it. I don't really represent anyone, so no one can sack me, no one can fire me, and I can say what I want, and they just have to listen to it. And because I annoy them to the point that they send me an invitation from their office, I can get a connection going and speak to them, like I said before, with Lisa Vlahos, in a personal way where they're not in an authoritative sort of manner. Keeping on top of new science. Everybody has to educate themselves. We can't let it just be one person or two people putting out a lot of information. I know the hemp guys put out a lot of great information. All of it's evidence-based, a lot of it's peer-reviewed, so it's good to keep on top of that as well, because if you're going to be talking about cannabis and someone asks you a question, if you can give them an answer that they can check out and they know you didn't bullshit them, then it's going to be fantastic. They'll be passing that information on to their friends as well. Education, education, and more education, and then some more education as well. I work in education. We need to get people educating it about. We need to stop the whole thing about saying no to drugs and that sort of stuff, and we should be saying no drugs, as in I want to know about drugs. If we teach our kids, and I've got 3 boys, my boys know more about cannabis than probably a lot of people in Parliament. They're 7, 6 and 17 months. The 17-month doesn't know too much just yet. But they need to know about it. I tell them it's a plant that Daddy uses because I don't want to use this pill can kill me, this pill can kill you, but this plant isn't going to hurt any of us. Once they know about it, it becomes normal for them. It's not going to be a thing that they're going to look at in a stigmatic way in the future. And if they can talk to their friends about it and say, hey, it's cool, it's normal, then there should be no issues with that. Talk to anyone that listens, and talk to anyone that doesn't listen as well. A lot of people shut down sometimes because they don't want to hear the information. Tell them anyway. And get involved. If you can get involved with your community, this is really going to be a grassroots push for advocacy and legalisation now. Once everyone wants it and all the people want it, the government won't have a choice. Otherwise, they'll just start losing elections, and the ones that do support it are the ones that are going to win elections. Just a little thought I'd leave you with. All cannabis use is medicinal, thanks to your endocannabinoid system. The only difference between use is the intent of the consumer. So when we're going to talk about medical and recreational and CBDs and THC and that sort of stuff, your body doesn't care what label is on the jar. And that's something we need to tell politicians as well, and remind them that they've got an endocannabinoid system and how it can regulate the homeostasis of their health. It's just science. We need to get it to them and teach them. Get in touch. That's the end of my quick presentation. I'll leave some room for questions. There's my details if anybody would like to get in touch. Are there any questions? No questions. Oh, one up the back. Microphone coming around, mate.
Out of curiosity, there probably aren't formal surveys, but what would your belief be about the opinions of other law enforcement officers about the use of cannabis in the community? Are they generally, Michael was saying some of them have, believe the reefer madness. How many of them are supportive? How many of them are oppositional to it?
Yeah, for
sure.
Out
of curiosity.
In my experience, I think it's very much the older generation, the baby boomers that were brought up kicking in heads and putting guys out on bail that were dead with their bail papers in their pocket sort of thing, so they didn't have to go through all that sort of crap. Those guys are very much into reefer madness still, and they're the hard ones to try to convince. A lot of the younger ones, though, can see the benefits. I know a lot of police officers with kids with epilepsy and that sort of stuff that are going through this. I get messages from them on a weekly or daily basis sometimes, asking for updates, asking how they get into trials. They're at their wits' end. They're at that point where they're willing to risk their career and their mortgage and their livelihood and friends and that sort of stuff just to see their kids smile and be happy and that sort of stuff again. You've got the Whitelaws and the Carters and the O'Connells and that sort of stuff. There's so many families that are benefiting from it, all illegally, and then you've got parents that are just waiting because they can't risk losing a job, they can't risk having to miss a mortgage payment and that sort of stuff. Does that answer your question? So if I give you a percentage, probably I'd say 70% would support medicinal cannabis. And I think you can see that as well through the stats that they're in with that. Just the seizures are starting to go down on a smaller basis, and they're getting involved with a bit more of the commercial stuff with crime gangs and that sort of stuff. But it's growing, definitely, the ones that I speak to, for sure. Any other questions?
If there's 70% of the police force you claim possibly support it, then why don't they go through their union to try and get it changed?
The police are there to enforce the law, not to change it, not to discuss it. When I was in the job, as much as you disagree with any policy and that sort of stuff, it's still your job, and if you don't do your job, they give you the arse. I got the sack from Pohl because I queried policies that needed changing and the ways they treated people and policies and that sort of stuff. So when you start querying stuff, you get marked, and then you have a pretty shit time through the rest of your career, and you have fun with that. But I think the ones that aren't saying anything and approaching the union, like I said before, the stigma behind it then in protecting your job, and at the end of the day, it's an income for them. The uniform comes off for them at the end of the day, and they're normal people with normal kids and that sort of stuff. But any one other person wants to protect their job, and sometimes you can't open your mouth because of a uniform you might wear.
And this will be the last question.
This is not so much a question, but just a touch on your last slide. When you're feeding the endocannabinoid system, I think it's good to mention that you should consume it orally as well. Like, you really got to eat it, as well as consume THCA, which is from the raw plant. Like, when you can juice it and eat it, then you're fully feeding your endocannabinoid system.
I agree. Ingest in all the ways.
Hey, thanks very much, Damon. If anyone else has any other questions and they'd really like to keep chatting with Damon, then please head out to the deck out here and chat with him personally. So thank you a million for coming and sharing those thoughts with us.
No
Very
worries. Thanks for having me.
inspiring. Thank you.